Welcome to another week of the Every Bit Counts Challenge. Let's jump into week 3. I started out this week with an easy one. Dehydrated bananas. We really like banana chips. I don't know what they do to them. Put probably extra sugar on them or dehydrate them in a certain way. But these home dehydrated ones are a little bit rubbery, like flexible, not as crunchy, but they're still good. I cut these on the bias so they would be longer and bigger, but they're about a 1/4 inch thick. That's what I was aiming for. I could always go back and kind of chunk them into cubes and put them in a trail mix or something, especially for my husband and his cousin when they go hunting. We're back in the barn kitchen on the floor again with the dehydrator. And don't put it in like that because I'm not that smart. I just did 4 sheets of them and put it on 135 for 6 to 12 hours. And it did do the full 12 because we came back the next day and I took them out.
About 12 hours. Let's just turn that off. Well, tastes like a banana. You got a lot like a banana.
This is back in our orchard. The orchard's not very old and we have struggled with drought for the last 2 years at least. And we've watered by hand this garden. It takes over an hour. We fill up buckets and let it drip through a little irrigation tube, and then later on we got the little water bags that go on the bottom, but we have to go around and fill that because we don't have any water back there, so it's a pain in the butt, but we're finally reaping the fruits of our labor. So with these pears, I plan on canning them in a light syrup, mainly for Derek. He likes to eat them with cottage cheese because he's some kind of weirdo. So obviously here you need to wash them and peel them. As I was peeling them, I wanted to keep them from browning, so I put them in a little cold water with some lemon juice in it. After that, you'll need to half them and core them. Some of these were so big that I had to quarter them, but it's a good idea to have wide mouth jars so they'll fit in there easier. In this pot on medium heat, I put 5 1/4 cups of water and 2 1/4 cups of sugar. Then you want to heat this to boiling, stirring occasionally. Since I need to hot pack this, which means the liquid in the jars is going to be hot, the water in the canner needs to also be hot. I got a little antsy because it was time to go to the farm almost, so I put my pears in before it started boiling, but you're supposed to wait till it starts boiling, and then boil them in a single layer for about 5 minutes. Then I put 2 halves in each of the jars and boiled the next batch. Then that hot syrup goes into the jars to a 1/2 inch headspace. Look at me measuring and everything. The official recipe said to use 8 to 12 pounds of pears. I just used whatever came off the tree. So I ended up running out of syrup, but no big deal. You just make some more, make sure it's still warm, and fill those jars. Make sure you wipe the rim off because these are sugary. Put your lids on, finger tight, and then it's going to go in the water bath canner for 20 minutes. The herbs at the farm aren't really used for cooking unless we already have dinner planned, which lately we haven't. We're just kind of throwing it together last minute, but a lot of this basil has flowers on it because I don't use it often. I haven't read anything that says Thai basil goes bad when it flowers, but I did find some basil on my sweet basil that wasn't flowering, so I used the leaves off of that one. I also had rosemary that you'll see in a minute, but it was shrouded by the basil and didn't survive. And my sage was shrouded by the Thai basil and had spider mites real bad, so I couldn't use that, but I had thyme and oregano as well. Look, my rosemary just cured itself.
Okay, I'm gonna get these washed.
Any of the smaller leafed herbs I left on the stem, and I'll pull those off later after it's dried. I put this on 110 for 1 to 4 hours. I think I checked it at 2 hours and it wasn't done yet. And then I forgot it overnight. So it dried for about 14 hours. I'm particularly glad that I have Thai basil because we did can some faux broth. Now I can have Thai basil in that even in the wintertime. There were a whole bunch of bananas on clearance, so we got some for banana bread and some for the pigs. You know, every time I type banana, I had to say B-A-N-A-N-A-S. I'm doing 4 batches, and instead of splitting it into 4s, I decided to do more dishes. This is kind of an experiment. I just wanted the dough, because I was like, well, you can freeze cookie dough. Why can't you freeze banana bread dough? I'll put the link to this recipe down in the description, but it requires 3 bananas each, which is pretty typical, and 8 tablespoons of butter. Surprisingly, there's not that much sugar in this. I tried to keep to the recipe and cream the butter into the sugar. It worked a lot better when I put the banana in there and the eggs, and everything was a little smoother together. And yet another bowl I have to wash. I combined all the dry ingredients and I did a bowl each so that I wouldn't forget anything. The original recipe has walnuts and raisins in it. My husband doesn't really like raisins. We just happen to have walnuts, so I put walnuts in 2 of them, and then I put chocolate chips in the other 2. I realize you can bake the loaf and then freeze the whole loaf, but I don't think it'll last quite as long as the dough, so again, experiment. The plan was to vacuum seal these. Just watch.
Well, and that's why I got the bigger bags too. Open them.
Please. Oh, please no. Oh, please no. Oh, please no. No. Ah.
Oh man, I didn't expect it to do that. That stuff expanded like crazy.
Ah. Oh my gosh. Anyway, like I was saying, put it in a Ziploc bag and then freeze it. Even though it's about 1 billion degrees outside, we had stew the other night just because it was easy. Just a meal in a jar, so I'm making moose stew today. If you're new to game meat, don't be intimidated, just treat it like beef. It doesn't need its own recipe. You don't have to look up recipes with moose. This is a beef stew recipe. I cut about a 4-pound roast into 1.5-inch cubes, and then we need to brown it. You don't need to cook it all the way through, just brown the outsides because it's going to process for over an hour, so it'll have plenty of time to cook. In the Ball Complete Book of Home Preserving, most of the recipe is in cups, so in order to know how many potatoes or carrots to get, there's a chart on page 426 through 429, and it'll tell you on average how many of whatever vegetable you need to make that many cups. I put more meat in there than I was probably supposed to, but I like meat in my stew. That's the main part of it. So some of these jars just had the vegetables, but luckily I canned beef the other week, so I can just throw that in there when I'm ready to heat it up. Now I added the spices that were listed in the recipe, but you can change that up. It won't affect your canning. Here it is after I put the water in there. I debubbled it, wiped the rims with a little bit of vinegar, and then put those lids on and processed in the pressure canner for 90 minutes for these quart jars. You may have noticed when I was canning that stew that I had some leftover potatoes. I didn't want those to go to waste, so I put them in jars, and then I ended up peeling and cutting some more so I'd have at least 4 jars to put in the canner. But I already did potatoes in another week, so make sure you go back and watch that one if you want to. A couple years ago, my husband came home with a big old sack of pinto beans from his hunt in Idaho. A friend from the army gave us this recipe, and his name is Stevie. So these are Stevie Beans. They're really good. I started this project with 4 cups of pinto beans soaked overnight. Then I drained them beans, make sure there's no rocks in there or anything. I gave them another quick rinse, and then I filled 8 candy jars 2/3 of the way each with beans. To each of the jars, add a 1/4 teaspoon of salt, garlic powder, pepper, and cumin, and then with a can of Rotel, evenly distribute that through the 8 jars. Next, you want to add some bacon. I used about 4 slices for these 8 jars, and I just cut them with scissors, but the bacon is to your taste. Fill the jars with water, leaving an inch headspace, and debubble. Because bacon fat could have gotten on the rim, make sure you use vinegar and clean the rims off before you pressure can for 40 minutes for pint jars. And hey, if this looks good to you, let me know in the comments if you're gonna try them. Make sure you're subscribed. I have other week's videos from this challenge, and there'll be another one next Wednesday. I do most videos on Sundays, and as always, if you like this video, feel free to subscribe. I upload most Sundays, and you can keep watching us grow our farm. Have a good one.